Welcome to the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center's 21st season of the Environmental Film and Speaker Series. It is my honor to share a land acknowledgement. The Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center is located on the traditional homelands of the Pasquosa. We acknowledge the traditional lands and offer respect and gratitude to the Pasquosa and to the diverse Indigenous peoples that reside in North Central Washington today. Good evening. I am Kimbra Bond, and on behalf of the Education Department at the museum, we are so pleased to offer this event about the movie Gather. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to let you know that the Environmental Film and Speaker Series exists to provide stimulating educational opportunities to encourage conversation and consideration of various topics that affect the environment on so many levels. These events happen on the first Thursdays of the month and have been mostly virtual due to the pandemic this year, and we are planning an in-person event on January 6th to start off the new year. We will be exploring some local Indigenous stories with Randy Lewis and the film A Winter's Tale. Seating will be limited, and so please register soon for that event. He will be joined by flautist Arnold Cleveland and geologist Nick Zentner. Then, on February 3rd, Sustainable Wenatchee, we will be sponsoring the timely movie 2040, where award-winning director Damon Gamio embarks on a journey to explore what the future could look like by the year 2040 if we simply embrace the best solutions already available to us to improve our planet and shifted them rapidly into the mainstream. Structured as a visual letter to his 4-year-old daughter, Damon blends traditional documentary with dramatized sequences and high-end visual effects to create a vision board of how these solutions could generate the world for future generations, or regenerate the world for future generations. If you would like to sponsor an event or recommend a movie, please reach out to me in the event or reach me at the museum. I appreciate suggestions. I'm always keeping a list for the next season. Amazingly, it is December already, and the museum would love to have you and your family join us for some of the upcoming events at both at the museum and at the Wells House. We have holiday teas, and Santa Claus is visiting. There is a ugly sweater cookie decorating event, and so much more. So please check the upcoming events on the website and plan to join us. And also, if you haven't become a member, I encourage you to do so, as there are special events just for members and discounts both at events, for some events, and in the gift shop. And it is loaded with good stuff for the holidays. Once again, welcome and thank you for participating in this conversation about Gather. I saw this film a couple of years ago and was moved by the resilience and perseverance of Indigenous people across the land to share their perspectives, beliefs, and rich culture with community and family. This film addresses many environmental themes, from water rights to salmon fishing, and authentic native food gathering to cultural rights on and of the land. I'm so pleased to use this platform to hold this community conversation to explore the local and global work happening now. Over the last couple of weeks, the sponsors for tonight's event, Cascade Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, have thoughtfully asked a few guests to join the conversation, and I am thrilled to have them here to add their perspectives. Introductions will follow. We are assuming that everyone has seen the movie, has had the opportunity to view it, but it is still available for a short time, a few more days, and you can also find it in various places online in the future. But tonight, I am joined by Nancy Warner and Diane Grudy of Cascade Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, or CUF, and to guide the conversation through breakout rooms and group sharing. We are here to listen, to learn, to thoughtfully and respectfully contribute from our experience, and empower one another to a more rich and unified future for all. We hope that this conversation opens the door to further conversations and learning about the lands we live upon and the healing that needs to happen. I'd like to introduce our 3 guests on the call who will be helping with our breakout rooms. First, Mary Big Bull Lewis is an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribe, Wenatchee, Moses, and Eniet bands, and a descendant of the Blackfoot tribe. She was born and raised in the Wenatchee Valley and has continued to raise her family here. Mary is an Indigenous entrepreneur who owns 2 small businesses with her husband, Wenatchee Wear and Our Digital Design. She has worked in the legal field, medical field, and has found her purpose through her culture, art, and entrepreneurship. Mary is also the chair for a local Indigenous-led nonprofit, the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation. IRRF was established in 2021 to preserve history, culture, traditions, and language through education and advocacy. The goal is to provide a space on ancestral homelands for members of all tribes to practice cultural traditions, ceremony, and fellowship. In her free time, she enjoys hiking, photography, drawing, and learning. John Eli Sai is a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation and is of the Okanagan, Methow, and Wenatchee tribes. Sai was born and raised on the Colville Indian Reservation in Omak, Washington. Sai carries cultural education from his grandmother and extended family that ties him to the lands and waters. He served for over 20 years on the Colville Tribes government as former council chair and representative, as well as leading departments that focused on tribal lands, cultural preservation and revitalization, economic development, renewal, energy development, policy, and governance. Sai promotes and educates about the rights of sovereign Indigenous peoples and nations to ensure that those rights are fully respected. Sai currently serves as the Traditional Territory Advisor for the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation to provide a critical hub in the assertion of tribal rights and interests throughout the tribe's traditional lands. Mr. Sai seeks to build a better future for all generations to come. You can find Sai camping, hunting, hiking, reading, and salmon fishing with his family. And our third guest, Fred Provenza's earthly adventure began in Salida, Colorado, where as a child he fell in love with wild animals before working on a ranch and later earning a degree in wildlife biology at Colorado State University. He is a professor emeritus of behavioral ecology in the Department of Wildland Resources at Utah State University, where he worked for 35 years, directing an award-winning research group that pioneered an understanding of why animals select the foods and habitats they do and how their behavioral links to soil, plants, herbivores, and humans. His latest book, Nourishment: What Animals Can Teach Us About Rediscovering Our Nutritional Wisdom, extends his theories of nutritional wisdom to human food selection and health, and calls into question our blind adherence to academic, corporate, and political authorities. He lives in Ennis, Montana, where he hikes, boats, and gardens with his wife Sue and Black Lab Henry. Tonight we are exploring 3 questions in breakout rooms and then back into the larger room. And for those who are watching this recording, I wanted to give those to you. The first question that will be explored is what in the film spoke to you or resonated with you the most? And then we will discuss what in the film challenged you the most. And finally, so what do we do now? Where do we go from here? So to continue the conversation, our group was talking similar topics, of course, that thin space, how the youth are learning, and how the level of responsibility that they are having to take on at such a young age to try to create a string of consciousness to, and we all know that not all of us are teachers and not all of us have all of those abilities, and how hard that must be to not only learn a language, but to pass it on, how to learn how to cook and to forage and to hunt and all of these things. And then how in the world to even pass those on is such a huge impact on a person, on a culture, on a youth. And then the fracturedness, Lynn said it so eloquently, how colonialism fractured the knowledge base, right? And so you lose this at such a deep rudimentary level that is extremely hard to come back from. And how do we even do that? And I see that as like, how do we play a part in that healing? We talked about what addiction, when you have that hopelessness or that lack of so many things. And Ben talked about the richness of the foods that are gathered in all parts of the world, and are gathered and celebrated in different cultures from around the world. So several of us were, taking note of the food, and maybe we're all hungry.
Okay, is that all of our groups?
I guess I'll speak for our group.
Yeah.
We talked about just the dominant culture and how it's kind of two different importances with monetary and versus the connection to the land. And so that was something that was brought out throughout the film, as well as reconnecting with the bison and the young girl that took it upon herself to run all those tests and figure out the benefits of eating bison versus just beef. And again, the importance to reconnecting to the land and feeling the sadness, inspired, proud, hopeful, and empowered by these people taking the initiatives to create positive change and turning this gas station into a restaurant. Like, how amazing is that?
Yeah. Okay, so we, again, will break into small groups. Same process, 5 minutes. The question this time is, what in the film challenged you the most? What challenged you in the film? 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss it. Okay, we're back to the big group now. So let's go through the same process again, just whoever wants to share about their group. Could be the same person, could be somebody different. What challenged you in this film?
Leroy, do you mind if I put you on the spot to talk about the point that you made?
I don't think everyone is back from their rooms.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thanks.
And Diane, just FYI, Shannon is going to report from room 1.
All right. Do we have 6 rooms? Is that what we have?
Yeah.
So are we ready to go? Or is everybody back?
We're missing a, oh, there's Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah, back. I'm back. We're back.
Everybody's back now.
Thank you.
Okay, so Leroy, Nancy asked you to share.
I don't know. I was speaking pretty passionately, at the time. I don't know if I can duplicate it again. Actually, it just has to do with the. I've been involved or known, Native American cultures throughout my life. I was born in Oklahoma and have relatives that are Indigenous, Cherokee and Chickasaw and Creek and Choctaw and that kind of thing. So to know the constant struggle that they have of being acknowledged for their way of being, their way of knowing, their connectedness to the earth, to the food, that's not, our culture puts a value on everything, a monetary value, and it's worth this or it's worth that. And if it's not, it's worthless, and so they, I think that's what struck me throughout the film, was trying to get that message of the value of just knowing spiritually, that deep connection to your food, to the earth and plants and animals and, life that's not monetary. I think that was what just continually struck me throughout the film. Thank you.
I'd like to call on Bruce from our group to share, because you also were speaking pretty passionately.
Thanks, Diane. I think in our group, at least some of us felt like a big challenge is sort of, what do we do now? Especially if you're like in my situation, growing up, and American history was all about manifest destiny and these nice settlers. And now you realize, oh, the history is really different. And for example, where I live in Leavenworth, I'm living on what should be Piscosa land. And there are thousands of us here living that way. And so when you realize how, frankly, awful the history is, the challenge is, well, now what do we do? And frankly, that's not clear to me.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another group? Person.
Yeah, I can speak for our group, and largely the same things, like the kind of the shame of being a part of the privileged colonial culture that essentially, committed genocide and destroyed all of the cultures. And then the question of how do we help undo that? What's our, what can our participation be to try to, repair some of the damage that's been done, or support the processes that are currently going on? How do we help people reconnect, with their cultures? And then just a kind of a look at the history, and the difference between what is the history taught by the people who lived the genocide, and what's the history taught by the people who committed it, and how do we reconcile that?
I'll talk for our group. because I was voluntold, as Deb said. I think we're seeing a common theme here among the different groups is the challenge of, we talked about how our success in life comes at the cost of the Indigenous people, and how we were not taught that our life. We're realizing more and more. It's shattering. You know, one person has a family farm that's generations, and wait, where did that come from? Where did that land come from? I'm learning more and more about my mom's side of the family. Not very much yet, but trying to delve into that native side. And yet the other side is all colonialists, and what that does to us. And again, Lynn said it so well. What have we learned, especially older folks like me, who were taught all the lies? And now we're delving into that and learning the truth. And yeah, what do we do? What do we do now? We want to keep making land acknowledgements with no action behind it. That's something that's come up in other discussions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody from our group want to share?
I volunteered Shannon to talk from our group.
Well, again, just I think we maybe we were wordless. We talked about utter humility and bewilderment at the utter slaughter that was so intentional, and just kind of wondering how whites even survived in some way. How in the world did we survive when we're so ruthless and ignored such deep wisdom that is eons old? And I think we continue to do that. We're a waste culture, and we need to come to some considerations there.
One more group, I think.
Yeah, I think our group just basically discussed exactly what everybody else did. What are the next steps? This is great. We have to continue educating ourselves, and at the same time think about, okay, how do we move forward?
Okay, well, that's good, because it brings us to our next question. One of the Yurok men in the film said that the Industrial Revolution is over. Now we are in a restorative revolution. And Twyla, the San Carlos Apache woman in Arizona, she said, Mother Earth is speaking and saying, we need to do something. So the next question for our 5-minute breakout group is, so what do we do now? Where do we go from here? How do we continue? What does it mean to be in a restorative revolution?
Welcome back, everyone, from our final breakout room. Welcome back from our final breakout room.
You know, Kimberly, we can't get overwhelmed by the shame.
Yeah.
But we also have to deal with it. Right? We have to sit with it. We have to figure out how we're going to get undone from it.
Yeah.
So we stop avoiding the, looking at the stuff that makes us feel the shame.
Yep. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that. Truly agree.
Me?
No, we're good.
I was telling you what I learned.
Are you reporting from your group, Ben?
No, I was reporting to you to say what I've learned.
Oh, okay. Do you want to put it in the chat or do you want to say it?
I already did.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll check it out. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks, Ben.
So this should be some very interesting ideas for this question. And this time I'd like to hear from our guests too, a little bit more on where can we go from here? Yeah. So is that everybody back now? Okay, so who wants to speak about what you talked about in the little group?
I can talk for our group. We kind of came up with a few different things. One was a basic thing about trying to lean back on some and learn more about traditional knowledge, and with the acknowledgement that people have been living in where we're at right now for thousands and thousands of years in a real sustainable way, and had highly just developed systems for being in these places. And we've lost a lot of that, and a lot of our modern systems are evidently really being super stretched right now. So there's just a lot of power in diving back into traditional knowledge. Then we were figuring out, well, how do we do that? And that's a complicated piece. So we thought about then ways to come at and support support groups that are working on it, whether it's tribal groups, nonprofits, but kind of get behind and lend our support. And whether that's working with young activists, whether it's supporting elders, whether it's working with youth groups, but just to kind of try and get involved, ask questions, and learn. And then there was one last point that was really brought up, that was this idea of, I can't remember the exact word, but it was about finding the sacredness in the earth again. And I think in a lot of our modern culture, we've really stepped away from that. And that's just so key to all this that's going on, is really looking at what the earth has to give and honoring that and having that as a core piece. That's what we had.
Okay, Fred asked me to speak for our group, and we talked about how people can get overwhelmed when they look at all the issues and problems with the earth and climate change and so on, and loss of animals and habitat. However, we also agreed that you can look globally, but think globally, but act locally. And groups and peoples can come together to solve some problems. Perhaps different groups can come together and will support and work with the Wenatchee Pisclosa to find a solution, to find a piece of land, to help in that restorative process with the people that are here. But the idea of coming together and sharing sharing resources.
Well, I'll add a couple notes from my group and invite Vern and Lori and Ben to add anything, but we talked about the need to basically, we need direction, and we want to work as a community with Indigenous people to take action, and we don't want to envision something we think is needed. We want to work together with Indigenous people taking the lead. And so then we also do want to put our money where our mouth is and move beyond land acknowledgements, which are very useful, as Ben pointed out, because it's the start of a process. It's the start of a process. And in some quarters, a land acknowledgement would be still a revolutionary thing to do. You know, I mean, I think the group of us here see that as like, we're ready to move on. We're ready for more action. So anything else that you guys would add to this? We're going to spend more time on this topic. It's a critical one.
I just saw it as a positive circumstance we're in now. You know, I don't feel static going, gosh, we need something to do. And that doesn't mean there's not a lot to do. But what I'm saying is my description of it was my state of mind, my understanding of the circumstance and engagement in it is exponential compared to where it was a year ago, and certainly for 55 years of my life. You know, and so here we are again, the second time this week on the screen with Mary Lewis and, you know, and these other great people, and that I have to be careful. I tend to be a problem solver. So when you say what's next, I can give you a whole list of things that's next. But those are my things that are next, and they are not the correct path. And I understand that now, right? Like, I get that. Hey, I'm woke. But so that's why I'm here. I'm here to hear the legitimate leaders of this effort help guide us into where we're going. Anyway, I feel it's a very positive place to be. I don't feel static. I feel, you know, ready to do something.
I will jump in here because I am. Some of the comments that came up in our topic of this area were some of the first steps as we're starting to see some of those mascots coming down from different places around the country, and those are steps. They are acknowledgements. It's action that's being taken. How to get rid of the monoculture, big ag, and support local, buy local, support with the dollar. We're in a dangerous spiral when it comes to where our food sources come from, and how we can start to make changes in that area. For me, education is a big piece of this. Thank you for coming tonight and being a part of this conversation, because this is where we are empowered. It's where we do this for ourselves, for our families, for our nieces and nephews and grandchildren to stop the cycle and know better and do better. I know through the museum, you know, we're seeing all the third graders this year and doing the Piscosa box and education around that. And so empowering, I'm looking for that empowerment to speak wisely. And our team is doing that, and then how we support local educators. Mentioned that one already, empowering the schools. Another thing that came up was we haven't talked about water and the importance of water and water rights and water contamination and water, all of that. And then, you know, I'm hoping that I'm going to put this out there, and hopefully, John, you can speak to some of this, but action that we can take around treaty knowledge, treaty status, and actions that are happening that we can help take action on. That this work is not, this has been going on for generations already. And so there are actions that we can take, and I'll look for that in your talk. Maybe that can be on there on that list, John. Thank you.
Betsy, Leroy, Sandy, anybody want to say something from our group? we too talked about that it's not our ideas. We can all come up with what we should do, but we need to be in community and be listening to each other of what the needs are and how we might meet those needs, and more listening than talking.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the essence of it, that once again, the dominant culture has a tendency to want to step in and fix things and say how it should be done. And I'm a big believer in listening to those trying to tell us what needs to be done, because they have the once again, it's that connective, it's the way of knowing that they know, and not our educated whatever is dominant in our culture. And we have a tendency to work from our own core, which is our education system and stuff, instead of listening to what they're really trying to say about that connection, that spiritual connection, and that need to be connected to the earth and all that's living. So anyway, yeah, it's listening more than trying to tell, I guess, or fix.
Another group?
Can I just tell Fred the word I was thinking of was corruption?
Okay, good. I'm glad you finally came to mind.
I had a senior moment in our discussion, and now I'm done talking.
Well, in our group, there were only 3 people and one of them's already left the meeting. So John, you want to say anything or should I say something?
Go ahead, you go, and then I'll add some.
Yeah, okay. Well, in our group, John started off by saying, and I think it's not necessarily the most exciting strategy, but I think it's probably the wisest, is taking small steps together. And I think that's what we need to try to move our community towards. And some of that is on education, such as tonight, thanks to the museum. And where I am in Leavenworth, the Wenatchee River Institute is starting on education, and up in the Mettown Conservancy and others are starting on education. So there are small steps. That's not always the most, if you're impatient, that's not always the most satisfying way, but it may be the best way, because we have lots of minds to change. And then I think we're starting to see some small steps on the land front itself. The Mettown Conservancy recently returned some land to the Colville Conservation Northwest, and others just recently did the same thing. There's also the chance for just reopening lands to Indigenous people for them to use. And so the combination of education and taking small steps in land, I mean, maybe that's what we do at this stage. John, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, you covered it really well. I think the core of it is education and learning and understanding how we came to be where we're at today. Along the way, there's a lot to learn and can give us clues. I guess that phrase was, sometimes you need to look back to see where you need to go forward. And I think there's a lot of really good things in there that once we do this work, we're gonna continue to learn, right? And I think we're gonna feel a lot of angst and just uncomfortableness of learning all this information, but I think it can provide us that impetus to take small steps and build that foundation to walk together. And I think the last thing I'd add is that it's my firm belief, like once everybody in this region comes to understand their connection to the land, their connection to the water, and how important it is to take care of those things because they will take care of you. And that's like the basis of our cultural teachings. And that's the responsibility and the interaction you have with nature and the gifts it gives. You also have that responsibility to take care of it as well. And I think people are starting to learn that, but I think through education we can keep that stronger for people, future generations.
Maybe I can just add one quick thing to that is that the earth cannot speak for itself, water can't speak for itself, so it's up to us to be their voice, and just to know that sometimes gives you the power to, when you want to speak for water or the earth or plants or animals, that you are their voice, you're speaking for them. So just to be aware of that.
Love that. I love that. Because I think, was it you, Kimber's talking about water rights? How do we quantify the water rights of salmon that are coming up into the Icicle? How we put that in our equation?
Kimbers, can I kick in a thought here? It's not radically different at all. It's the same kind of thing, but it's so easy for us in this era. Fred was talking about the macroorganism or something to that effect. The notion that it's all so big and overpowering that we can't really do anything. It doesn't make any difference what we do. And I just think it on an individual basis, on our own individual spiritual level, it makes a huge difference if we act in a way in which we live and move and have our being in a way that is a healthy relationship with the earth.
Yep. There's healing that has to happen. That's a theme that comes through this for each one of us. And we haven't even talked about getting into generational trauma and how that's passed down. We see that in many aspects. And so we hold it, and there's a lot to hold, but we hold it together. And I love that, taking small steps forward together, taking small steps together, and the idea of looking back so we know, we learn, and we move forward together. I know that Cuff's dealing with that right now. We look back to move forward. Diane, how would you like to move forward at this point?
If there are any questions for our guests, Mary, John, and Fred, in the chat, I was just looking. I wrote a question about what are some ways to get involved locally or regionally with Indigenous efforts. What are some of the things that we don't know about or do know about, or yeah, and if anybody else has questions, just put them in the chat. We'll let our guests speak from the rest of the time we have now.
Yeah, I guess I can speak on a local effort and just discussing the new Indigenous-led nonprofit that was mentioned in my bio and that we discussed on Sunday as well. We have several board members that came tonight, as well as Steve was here earlier. So he's been a huge effort, but locally there's a lot of Indigenous-led organizations or partnerships that are happening. And so just being mindful of respecting the work that's being done, as well as looking at a broader range, because it does really take the local, regional, and worldwide. And that there's, at the end of the film, they talked about a restorative revolution. And we see that happening across the US with these Indigenous-led organizations that are taking the initiatives to get things started, to move things forward. And I think that that is really inspiring, because for me, it's a lot of people that are around my age group, that our parents are survivors of residential schools, and that recognizing that our culture has been silenced, and that a couple of things that were brought up throughout the film, and when they talked about being born with the burden of being Indigenous and truly understanding what that means, and that, you know, we weren't always taught to be proud of who we were. We're forced to assimilate, especially being in a town here that doesn't have a lot of Native representation or discussion or curriculum in our schools. It's important to be proud of who we are. And so I just want to thank Cuff and the museum for continuing to seek out those partnerships and listening with open arms. And it's just a really healing movement to have the opportunity to have our voices heard. So thank you.
Thank you for stepping into this space with us, Mary, too. Appreciate that so much.
Yeah, John?
Build on, if I could build on what Mary was saying, that it's so important to, you know, recognize and understand those Indigenous efforts, you know, the local level and the regional level. And I think Bruce and I were talking about in our last breakout session about what it was like in that region 20 years ago. You know, going up the icicle with my grandmother, like we were kind of invisible. We just went and did our things to pick huckleberries and do the things that she was teaching us. You know, we didn't hang out much. And now it's so refreshing to hear all the hearts here tonight talk about wanting to make a connection, wanting to learn about that history, wanting to engage in all of your efforts. That's the number one thing. If you want to engage with Impasquosa, you know, I'm still developing that for the tribe, but you know, I am here to help with that. That's my purpose. So I see that as you know, I look forward to working with all of you down the road, because this is you know, sure, there's a lot of stuff that can get you angry and mad, but I think there's a lot more when you look toward the future of what we can do. And you know, those regional efforts can be anything from supporting fish passage plans or you know, looking at water and how we use it, all those types of things. There's lots of ways that we can develop these regional efforts.
Can I just, once again, after hearing you and Mary talk, I just, I think of you being the voice of your ancestors, you know, that you really, you're brave and you're strong, and you have that ability at this point to speak for all of those generations that have suffered, you know, behind you. And now, I don't know, it's just pretty neat that you can be that voice for them. So thank you.
So I'm a healer. Where can I learn the stories? I mean, the stories are part, you know, telling a story is how we educate kids. Telling a story is how we heal people. You know, our religions are stories. They are the mythology. So like, where can I go to learn those stories? You know, I'll jump in there. There's a couple of different places you can access. We've got a really cool section on our history and archaeology website on the Cobble Tribes. I think I can put it into the chat maybe. And the first one is just around the Wenatchee, but there's a number of other documents listed on there that talk about some of those stories and how Coyote brought salmon back to the people, or you know, within those stories too, because I think they've been labeled coyote stories, but they're not coyote stories. The elders would get really mad and say, that's not coyote. It's talking about the culture, or the Chaptequas, the lessons and how you're supposed to treat one another and treat the earth. Coyote was an example of what not to do.
And you know, I would talk with people like, I think we've got a problem of coyote in all of our collective consciousness that we need to use as an example of what not to do. And then, you know, look at those stories and you can see examples of how people, you know, they would get salmon or they'd get something, they would share it. And the spirit that is honored at the same time of receiving that gift and then giving it in that same way is exactly that connection to the earth and to those lands and waters. So I put one in there, and on that same webpage, there's lots of other stories too that you can use. There's some really good examples in there.
Yeah, and the museum has my Uncle Randy Lewis's books. He's a local Wenatchee, and he works with local historian Bill Lehman on those 3 books, and they just released one of them like a month ago.
It's currently for sale in our gift shop.
Thanks, Anna.
John, I was wondering, you know, it's easy to donate to a nonprofit like Mary's, but how do people donate to the tribe? Is there a way to, is that just, I mean, it's like a government agency, so I wondered how it's a different way to support directly.
Yep, there's two ways. So first is donating to the tribe, you know, with that in particular, but you know, I think there's a movement underway right now to develop a nonprofit underneath the tribe for the Piscosa, for the Wenatchee people, and the efforts that they've undertaken and that we've worked so hard on, and trying to get our land back and our fishing rights and hunting and gathering and all that. So we're working on that.
And is there like, oh, did you give us a website to go to look at that? Yeah.
That's for stories.
Oh, stories. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fred, we haven't heard from you.
I've very much been enjoying each of the breakout sessions and the conversations that took place in those sessions, and just trying to be all ears, basically. From my perspective, I think a lot about how we peoples, not only in the US, but maybe around the world, have really broken our linkages with the landscapes that we inhabit in the ways that we're all talking and that John and Mary are talking about. I think about how can we get people, city people, let's say, or, you know, just people more generally, to realize that we are the earth and the earth is us, that we're members of nature's communities. What we do to them, ultimately, we're doing to ourselves. It may be way too late by the time we wake up to that, but you know, only by nurturing nature's communities can we ultimately nurture ourselves. And I often think we do that by declaring love, not war, on one another and the landscapes that we inhabit. So, you know, just some thoughts, but they fit with everything I've been hearing tonight. Just another way of trying to say those words. That's what I think about, though, and that's what I write about and give lots of talks and webinars and so forth about. It's just, as we were saying in the last group with Penny and Larry and Ronnie, you know, it can be overwhelming, the scale of it, ecologically, economically, socially, but we can, each one of us can act. We can each, from our own sphere, and intend the good. And I think that's all we can do. It's bigger than us in many ways, right? All that's going on, it's incredible. Who knows where it'll end up? I like to talk about the fact that the only constant in life is change. Things are forever moving and changing. And in one of the groups said, well, you know, we're one more species on the planet, and maybe we may or may not be around for a long time or not. That takes us all those linkages to the spiritual part of things as well, as to very deeply in my mind of our linkages with the earth and with the spiritual nature of things and bigger pictures. So I won't just ramble, but those are some I've just totally enjoyed listening, you know, and listen. One last, well, no, I'll let that go, but it's just been very nice for me to listen to what everyone is saying and the reflections really from the heart in every breakout room I was in. It wasn't a bunch of mentalistic gymnastics. It was more from the heart and grappling with the questions were great. I think that for each session. So a few thoughts from me. I didn't fall asleep yet or anything. I am just trying to listen.
I just recently met Fred, and I would love to have him ramble on for hours so I could listen to his wisdom. So it's a joy to have you.
I have to say too, Nancy, thanks for the nice introduction. I didn't give her too much, so one way or another.
Yes, you did.
Or I gave her too much, whatever. But you know, for me, so much of this, I have been fascinated since it's probably in the womb, I don't know, but fascinated with the natural world. To me, it was all so just a part of my life forever. So when I was working on the ranch or being in wildlife biology, that was just an outflowing of deep interest in everything I've done. And so I think, you know, we've separated ourselves from nature, but we don't need to. Everyone can be a part of nature, right? I mean, we are, but we could all realize that, right? We're all indigenous to this planet in one way or another, and to recognize that and to appreciate that, and then to appreciate indigenous peoples. And what, you know, throughout my career, studying how animals nourish themselves, self-medicate themselves, use plants, use the communities, all that just links you. And then that's what my wife and I do. You know, we start a lot of the things that people I've worked with, and that you know what, that study how animals self-medicate, and they talk about how people learn from animals to self-medicate too. I mean, those linkages that we had with the plants, with the animals. And so anyway, I just, this is right up my alley for sure, all of this business. And I love the opportunity to be here listening and not talking so much, although I'm rambling now, so I'll be quiet.
I'll just say Fred's been here to Wenatchee for a couple of times, but it's been a while. So maybe post-COVID you could come again, Fred. It would be great to have you all meet in person.
It'd be wonderful to meet in person too, actually. It would be fantastic. Yeah. So we'll have to look forward to trying to do that. Now, I would love that, to do that.
Fred, in the introduction,
I don't know if I can.
You were from Utah State University. Did you go there?
Yes, for my graduate degrees. When I finished at
the other Aggies.
Yeah.
I was going to give you a heads up.
When I finished at Colorado State University, I said I'd never go to school again. That was it, you know. But after a couple, it's funny how those things happen, huh? When you look back over your life, how you really didn't ever plan anything. Just happens, huh? Just emerges, and it's wonderful. Actually, it's a wonderful thing.
Hey, Diane, I added a couple other links in the chat for people too to learn more. One River Ethics Matters is a regional effort that looks at the Columbia River Treaty and how it's one river between the two colonial states, U.S. and Canada, trying to divvy up what the Columbia means to them and monetize that. But there's a lot of multifaceted groups that come together on that project, looking at the religious community, tribal nations. So it's really good. And then the last one is River Warrior Society that supports our traditional canoe culture, which is pretty exciting too. That could be a whole nother night. Both of them could be.
Yeah.
Great.
There are many nights that this could, we could look at many topics. We really didn't get into salmon and the dams. And I mean, we in our planning conversations, there were many more conversations to be had. So thank you for those. I do want to, for those who are here, if there are other questions that you would like to ask, is there anyone that you can either put them in the chat or raise a hand, and we'll see if we can, we've got a little bit of time here that I'm happy to make that happen.
While we wait for a question, I just want to share that I met this really neat guy today. He happened to come in and he does this work with restoring the buffalo in Montana on the Blackfoot tribe, and he does some work on my other ancestral homelands in Brockett, Alberta, Canada, and is familiar with that, restoring the bison, the buffalo, and how important that is. And so it was just watching this movie again and then seeing that and talking to him, and it just makes me really happy to see that they are doing that, and that there's a really iconic museum up there that has this, it's called the Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump, and it has a lot of history and things about my Blackfoot tribe and that. So anyways, it was really cool to hear about the things that they're doing, you know, across Montana state and everywhere. So
John, you mentioned a canoe culture, and I just want to throw out to you that we have developed a sort of a little subculture around canoes through the Wenatchee Row and Paddle Club, by which, and we have 2 large canoes by which we can take out 8 to 10 people at a time and enjoy the river and get the perspective of the valley from canoes. And I just want to throw out that, you know, if you or other people want to share this with us, Penny and I kind of lead that for the club, and we'd just love to host people in that way.
That would be amazing. Yes, yes. Let's stay in touch on that, because I know our River Warrior Society, they love going anywhere. They love going on rivers. That would be amazing.
Well, we would just think that'd be a great honor, and it'd be so much fun. So if you want to connect with us through Cambris or anybody, or Nancy or somebody, or Mary,
Okay.
they all know us. So that'd work.
That's awesome.
And I'll add in too, Penny and Larry are wonderful museum volunteers. They actually take our students on the river every year for Youth on the Columbia. We haven't been able to bring that program back since COVID, just because it's close quarters, but they are very passionate about getting students on the water as well.
And I know that a few people are starting to need to leave the call, so we'll, I don't want to end the call now if we've got questions, but I do want to remind us that we do have next month in-person conversation with Randy Lewis, and showing of the Winter's Tale will be a lovely piece to show and see in the thick of winter. And so please plan on registering for that for the beginning of January. That's wonderful. And thank you for that reminder. I saw that Mary, you had put in the chat, let's scroll back up to that, Robin Kimmers, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, right? We'll be doing a virtual event through the North Central Washington Regional Libraries. And I forget the date on that. I know I'm registered. Does anybody have the date?
I think it's the 12th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming right up. Thank you.
And I was going to send that link to Fred and to register. And so we'll send that link out to everybody, because it's like, she is really great and would be another great participant in this conversation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yep, there is the DVD just made available. So thanks for the reminder on that, Mary. And I will make a note on this call that for the portions that were recorded, we'll just edit that, and then this will be part of our YouTube channel moving forward. And we will, our planning group will put together a final email that will go out to everybody, and the resources and ways to connect. And I think that's the biggest piece, is that we have faces, we have names, we have people to connect with. And we're all eager to move forward in many different aspects, the individual things that we can do, but also how we can vote with our dollars, to act with our dollars, to be a part of this in many different ways, taking the small steps forward together. I know that we were going to move toward final comments, and so maybe we do that. We have about 15 minutes, so that would be a few minutes for each of our guests if they would like to make a final kind of statement, and then we can sign off for the evening. Anything else that you had, Diane? I don't want to overstep there.
No, please, yeah, closing remarks, just to wrap it up.
We didn't have this assigned, so if you have something else you'd like to say tonight, John, Fred, Mary.
I would just
say I very much appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you this evening. I guess in summing up, thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Lamp, thank you for having us here. And Faith Zachary was on earlier. She's one of the leads of the River Warrior Society. But
Oh, great. Huh.
Yeah.
But thank you again.
Our pleasure, absolutely.
I
So
would like to.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really thank all the hearts that have been gathered here tonight to share and to learn, and it's been remarkable. It really has. You know, just thinking about a word that comes to mind when we talk about Mother Earth, we say Tamaholau, and when you break the word apart, it talks about that life spirit that's present in this area, that's cyclical, that's always moving, and for us to honor that relationship, we have to participate in that cycle of life, and that's the meaning of that word. It's much more than just Mother Earth. It's the cyclical life force that's here, and if we're not participating in a good way, we're not providing life. We're providing the opposite. So I think, you know, this whole process feels like we're moving into that small step into cycles of life. So thank you very much.
That's great. I sort of wanted to end on a picture of hope and health, and to go back to that point that Larry and Penny and Fred were talking about. It's like, how do we as individuals muster the energy to bust through all the nasty politics, you know, and stay healthy and keep moving? And I think you just nailed it, John. That's the cycle. If we're not in it, we're not healing. We're not happy. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Beautiful. Well, folks, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight. We're honored to have our guests with us. So thank you so much to Mary and John and Fred from all of the regions that you come from. In a world where many people, we have so much history and so much healing and so much to do. And I appreciate you taking this step tonight as a community, each one of us bringing it all together to walk this walk together. So thank you for being on tonight's call, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.